Welcome to the ABA and PT podcast, where I interview scientists and practitioners from the world of precision teaching as they share their journeys of how they found their way to the science of human behaviour, as well as their discoveries through the use of the standard acceleration chart. I'm Mandy, a scientist practitioner in Perth, Australia, impacted by my daughter with autism, who caused me to knock on enough doors to find my way to the extraordinary field of precision teaching. I'm on a journey to share how precision teaching and the standard acceleration chart can change the world and make it a better place to live. I've set myself a lofty goal to seek out the giants of precision teaching and to share their journeys and discoveries to influence the work of practitioners and parents who want to be profoundly impactful with their clients and their children by having the heart to chart. It's nearly 2 years since I interviewed Dr. Hank Pennypacker, who sadly passed away in 2023. What an honour to interview him and to get to his life's journey. I didn't mean 2 years to slip away. I recorded an episode and then hesitated as to whether I should publish it or not. The episode is about positive behaviour support, and I'm holding that episode for when I'm a little braver. In the meantime, in this comeback episode, I had the great fortune of catching up with the one and only Dr. Rick Kubina. Precision teachers will be very familiar with Rick, but for those of you who have not had the pleasure of hearing Rick speak and talk about the chart, here's who he is. He's a professor of special education at Penn State and the director of research at CentralReach. Rick's journey in behaviour science started back at Youngstown State University and then The Ohio State University, where he studied with the legendary John Cooper. At Penn State, he teaches courses on reading instruction, behaviour analysis, and research design, and his work has always been about finding that sweet spot where learning, science, and technology meet. He's done research on everything from explicit instruction and video modelling to robotics and precision teaching. Rick served as editor of the Journal of Precision Teaching Acceleration, and he's passionate about giving teachers, clinicians, and behaviour analysts the tools they need to make a real difference. And if that's not enough, he's also an entrepreneur. He co-founded Chartlytics, a software company that was later acquired by CentralReach, where he now helps drive innovation in behavioural health through digitisation, AI, and new ways of measuring and improving outcomes. In short, Rick is someone who's not just thinking about the future of education and behavioural health, he's building it. In this episode of the podcast, Rick speaks to us about all things precision teaching, from his great fortune of being supervised by Steve Graff, to his learnings from Ogden, to his love of the field of disability, his development of Chartlytics, the issues of destandardization of the standard acceleration chart, and to how AI is going to impact the world of precision teaching, all in just over an hour. Join me in talking all things precision teaching with Dr. Rick Kubina. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And I think I grabbed you just as you almost got off a plane. Is that right?
Yes. But I'm ready to go because I love this topic and I love everything that you're doing. So I have a second wind.
Thank you so much. I have a personal connection to you because you were the first, I guess, my chart parent. I think it's fair to say that
I am.
I had done online study with Patrick McGreevy and then found my way to the Precision Teaching Conference because I came to meet Karen Pryor. And the first person that I met when I rolled up, I attended one of your workshops, which I think might have been 4 hours. Is that right? A 4-hour workshop.
Yeah.
That was in 2018, I think. So, it's a lot has happened since then. And I would just love to hear your story of your upbringing, what influenced you as a young person and what kind of parents you had that resulted in you ending up in this amazing field and impacting so many people. Could you talk a little bit about your upbringing?
That is a big question, and I'll try not to spend the whole hour talking about it. So I'll be concise here. Very early on, and this is true for my entire life, I have always somehow been rooting for the underdog. I just remember always having that as a kid. When I was 16, I'm going to date myself here, but back in the States, we had these, they would call them mental health asylums, and they would take people that have any kind of mental health disorder, put them in these institutions, and I happened to volunteer there at the age of 16. So very quickly, I learned, it was eye-opening to me that you had all these people that were doing these behaviors that were very different. And of course, society's answer was, well, these behaviors are so far beyond the pale, let's put them in these institutions because you could never have them in society. And that opened my eyes. And from there, I decided, you know what, I want to go learn about psychology and help people. And I went to a school called Youngstown State, and that's where I met my mentor, Steve Graff. Steve Graff was one of these very prolific people generators of precision teaching. And I became so enamored with it. When you have a psych degree, that's a preparatory degree. You got to go on and do something else.
What course was Steve teaching then?
He taught a class on learning.
Yep.
So I started in 1985. I met Steve in 1986. And that's when I had my first class with him, which was on precision teaching.
And did you know anything about behaviorism before you studied psychology?
You know what? It's a good question. When you're in a psych undergrad, we had a very eclectic program. And there was this one professor there that was a practicing psychologist, and he was Freudian. And there was about a year where I really, how you look up to people? I looked up to this guy. I'm like, wow, he speaks well. He knows what he's talking about. I thought, this Freud guy knows what he's doing. So I bought all these Freud books. I started reading all about Freud. Who knows? In another life, maybe I would have turned out to be a psychoanalyst. But I also had classes on behavior analysis. And the behavior analysis classes just made so much more sense to me. Yep. And, I had cognitive classes, and it just made sense to me. So at any rate, I was interested in precision teaching and behavior analysis. I asked Steve, where should I go? He said, you ought to go up to Ohio State. There's this guy named John Cooper. And from there, again, being a dumb undergrad, not knowing anything, Cooper, Heron, Heward, those were my guys, literally. And I got my master's degree. I taught for several years, worked as a behavior analyst, and found that people just weren't doing these effective things that I was doing. So I said, I want to go back, get my doctorate, and then go out there and teach teachers. So I went back to Ohio State, worked for a few years, again, with Cooper and those other folks. And there's many other wonderful faculty at Ohio State. And then I became a professor, and here I am. That's my story.
Oh, that's a major summary of a long journey there. What was the first work that you did when you finished your degree that you mentioned?
I went out to California.
Yeah.
So Bill Heward's old advisor was this guy named Todd Ekus, and he was like a professor at UMass. And they had that connection. And so Bill just introduced me to him, and he's like, hey, why don't you come out to California? And I did. I learned there's nothing better than being applied to learn your craft. It's one thing to read these books and to read these studies. It's another thing to be responsible for these children. So we had children and adults, and I had to work with both of them. And all of a sudden, if there was a problem, they would come to me like, hey, so-and-so is beating up staff. What are we going to do about it? And like, hey, so-and-so won't take a shower at night. What are we going to do about it? So I had to come up with these programs for many people. And then you also have to learn how to operate with adults who are supposed to implement those programs. It's one thing to be able to come up with something. It's a completely another thing to have people who will actually implement those programs with fidelity. So it was an incredibly eye-opening experience for me. And I was very fortunate that I learned many good things there and had some good mentors along the way also.
What type of program was that? Was it a state-based program? Was it a private clinic? What was the
program? So this would have been 93 when I first started working. And back then in the States, there was a lot of money that was going into, they would call them post-acute neurorehabilitation centers. So people that had any kind of brain injury, you could have been born with something, you could have had lead poisoning, or you could have been an adult that you were, like we had one guy who was driving down the street and a golf ball hit him in the head, weirdly, and he was in a pickup truck. And he was completely, like, these people's lives are changed because of these brain injuries. There was a lot of funding back then. So these institutions would rise up and they would make money serving this population. And they still have them, but certainly the funding that was going into them wasn't like it was back in the 90s. So at any rate, I was working with people that had some type of neurological injury.
And what sort of data were you taking in that program then? Were you incorporating charting then?
I was using the paper chart, and I learned very quickly how challenging that is. Number one, to teach people the paper chart was incredibly challenging, but even more so to get them to be able to religiously collect data. And I made, again, now looking back, I see all these mistakes I made. I was trying to get people to collect frequency data. I just should have had people count things. And, just give me an easy count, do it for this time frame and do your best. And even having them do it every single day, that was another mistake I learned. Do it all day, way too long of a counting time. And you just learn all of these lessons. And through time, you see that people are going to do in some way, especially if you're an authority figure, they're going to try to comply. But the data you're getting back, stuff's probably made up, or sometimes I just get
Just
blank
because the
data
response
sheets.
effort is too high.
Way too high.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about that later and talk about Precision X. But yeah, I know, because you hear so many times, well, Og taught a 5-year-old to chart and it's super easy to chart. But you have to say, well, if the chart is such a powerful tool because for me, when I learned to chart, it changed my life forever, and and I will never look back. But then I look at, why is it that this incredibly powerful tool has not taken off and influenced the world more? It's, my biggest disappointment every day as I wake up and talk about this amazing chart. And as I rave about it to other parents, why do you think that we haven't had the impact that we could have in terms of engaging with this really powerful tool, both in our own science, in behavior analysis, but also outside of our science? What do you think that is?
Yeah, that's a big question. And I can only give you my opinion on this. It's a systemic issue. I've learned through the years about systems theory and systems thinking. And when you start looking at the world as a system, you can understand that when there's a system in place, it takes a lot to displace that system. For example, education. No matter where you are, no matter what country you're in, education is a system. And it could be different from, you're in Australia, I'm in the States. Our systems can be different, but if we're going to look at all the inputs and the outputs, we'd be able to map them out. We'd probably see a lot of similarities. For someone to go in and try to disrupt that system would just be a massive effort. And no matter how dynamic of a speaker you are, like Ogden Lindsley, he was probably one of the last in his generation that were the big name kind of people. Like today, no one's going to ever have that kind of big name recognition. Like, sure, you could get influencers. Sure, you could get people that are popular, that are writing books, but no one's going to have the stature of, being in the textbooks and these iconic people, these titans of psychology. That doesn't mean the science is dead and there won't be people making contributions, but just that era is gone. So looking at all the people, and again, I'm of the age where I started to bump into those. Like, I miss Skinner. Like, when I came into the field, like, he died in 92 or early 90s. My first conference was 93, so I just missed him. But I saw some other folks towards the end of their lives, and the cult of personality, the force of will wasn't enough to disrupt the system. So to make a long story short, a lot of things have to happen. And just saying, hey, we can produce better outcomes isn't going to cut it. You're not going to inspire people, be like, oh my God, this is so great. I'm going to drop everything and I'm going to do all this hard work that you're telling me. Nobody's going to do that. That's not going to happen. And if you want system change, you have to understand how that system's operating and how can you go in there and work within the system or displace the system, honestly.
Okay, there's so many questions that come out of that. But firstly, I just want to grab you and ask you, when was the first time that you met Ogden or heard Ogden speak?
That would have been 1993. So
Right.
Steve Graff, my mentor as an undergrad, he was very close friends with Ogden, and he would talk. Like, I learned all about all of these PT people. And in my very first conference in 93, he introduced me to him. And then I was in Og's orbit for the rest of my time, that being in the precision teaching, the small precision teaching community.
Yeah. And how did he impact you?
He was a character, and people that knew him would say that he would have this shock value. So he would say things that were so shocking. And if you listen to his talks, because he wanted people to embrace these ideas that he had. And one of his strategies of doing that was just to say something outrageous. People like, what? And, what's this guy saying? And they would listen. Their ears would perk up. They would listen to what he had to say. And I think that was an effective strategy. I think that worked for many years for him. And he was humorous too. He would say funny things. And, he was constantly trying to get people to buy into the system and to use his system. And being able to listen to him, for me, was quite remarkable, because I attended some of his workshops. Every time he would speak, I would listen to him, and you're just constantly learning new things from him.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I've searched everything I can it's weird because I kind of feel like I know him because I've had the great fortune of knowing so many people that did know him. And I just really love his sense of humor, his boldness, his stand on questioning things in the field and not being worried about what people think of him. That's what I think about Ogden.
Yeah.
I just wish more than anything I had the chance to meet him, because lots of people say to me, oh, you would have loved him and he would have liked you because you're like pushing the boundaries. But yeah, even just from the little bits that I've heard, there's things that just stick with me every day. Like one of the videos I remember listening to, he had this intervention for kids who are, early on in their skill building on a particular skill. And he would say to the kids, say, go, baby, go. He would say, get the kids to say, go. I do something similar. I get the kids to say skip over an error. But it's interesting that someone like that is impacting me, on a day-to-day basis, and I never met him. So he had a profound impact way beyond where he was. So is there any sort of wisdoms that you can recall that you hold on to that you remember him saying or speaking about?
He had such an incredible career. And of course, I missed out on so much of, his early time. When he was in the 70s and the 80s, when precision teaching was in its heyday, there were hundreds of thousands of students that were impacted. I mean, it was a huge thing in the States. And of course, like many things, it waned. And, now we're the remnants of that greater movement. I was listening to this audio tape of him from, it must have been the late 60s, early 70s. I got from a colleague of mine. And he was very quick to embrace what other people were doing. And he wouldn't dismiss people out of hand, which is refreshing. And he talked about, this was just an aside, he was talking about children, and he was talking about how do we get them to do things that they might not want. And there's a lot of punishment. It's very easy to go and be like, hey, don't do that. Or if you do this, this is going to happen. And he talked about how he took this idea from Maria Montessori. And like, if you're working with kids and they're having trouble walking in a line or something, and being quiet, he mentioned this, like, make a game out of it. And I forget the phrase he used, but it was so brilliant the way he said it. And like, use your quiet feet or something like that. And the kids would pretend and they would tiptoe and it'd be turned into a game. And the kids would do what you wanted them to do versus having all these punishment contingencies. And he was constantly trying to meet the learner at where the learner is. And that has been impact. And of course, in precision teaching, we have this phrase called, the learner knows best, which essentially means you have to meet the learner. Now, that doesn't mean that you embrace discovery learning where you don't teach them anything. It means that the environment is set up in a way that when you see what the learner is doing, this is their best response to how the environment has shaped them up. And so that has impacted me my entire career in thinking about, rather than being arrogant and saying, well, this is the box, this is how you have to teach everybody. And if you're not learning, well, then you're stupid or you have a problem. That's just a way that is not productive. And you meet people that are like that, like they have one way of doing things. And if you don't do that one way, there must be something wrong with you. Could never be something wrong with the way I've set things up. And again, there are many things that Ogden has impressed upon me, but I think that humanity, that way of understanding, that it's liberating to be able to help people and to be able to help them in a way that's compassionate, to be able to help people and meet them where they are, and always be thinking of how can we set up, arrange the environment, a very behavioral way of thinking, arrange the environment to optimize learning. And that would be my big lesson that I could share with you. But again, many others that I've had, but that one has been profoundly impactful in my life.
Yeah, I can really relate to that. I just, as you're saying that, many people have shared things that Ogden have said. I hope I'm quoting them right, but I remember someone shared with me, he said, you can't accelerate out of zero. And so, you've got to start somewhere with something. That kind of reminds me of that frame of thinking, like start with what you've got and build from there. And I love that about the chart because you see it straight away, right? You're not making any progress. You're like, well, I got nothing. I got to go back somewhere else and start where they're at. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And with the other thing that he said, I've been thinking a lot lately about functional analysis and artificial intelligence and what that means in terms of where we're going as a science. But I remember Kimberly Behrens passed on to me in terms of when do we start to intervene? And she said that Ogden said to her, the time to intervene is now. Don't worry about baseline. The chart will tell you whether you got it right or not. I love that.
That's right.
Because, I've worked in other programs, not my program now, but where people spend a lot of time collecting data. And meanwhile, there's a lot of behavior that you don't want to be occurring. And I think he said that, the time to intervene is now. You work out function as you go. The chart will tell you if you got it right.
That's right.
Yeah, amazing. And so I love always hearing about Steve Graff. I'm in contact with his brother-in-law, Jack Horman. At the moment, we have a little project coming up, and that's my next podcast. He has a beautiful little project called, I think Abigail has renamed it the Precision Positive Interaction Project. And we're just looking at charting across our day, positive interactions with people and everything that's going on in the world. So I'm really excited to have Jack and Abigail on next. But tell me some memories that you have of Steve. Obviously, he's really famous in our field. There's obviously a very outgoing person, really impacted people that he supervised in so many different ways. What are things that you hold with you now about his wisdom that he passed on to you?
Yeah, Steve, that's hard to answer because thinking about Steve, you don't realize when you go through life how impactful people are. And at the time, you wish someone would tell you that these are the people that are going to just have this incredible influence on you. And if you knew that, maybe you would embrace those times a little bit differently. And certainly with Steve, that was very true. He took much from Ogden, and he would take things from Skinner, and he would take things from all over the place. And, Steve, he dressed in a very unusual way, and he had these different phases. And one of the reasons why he would do that, so people thought he was a crazy professor.
Yeah.
He had a phase where he dressed up as the Lone Ranger. Now, this would make sense for Steve and make sense for people of our age, but younger folks who are listening to probably have never heard of the Lone Ranger because that time has passed in our, but at any rate, he would dress as him. And then he would start wearing these very short ties. Like he would get these ties and cut them like they were comically short.
Yeah.
And then he started dressing in a Star Trek phase. And all these times that he was dressing, he was doing this for different themes, but also he was inoculating himself about people talking about him. And, that was part of the reason why he would do some of these things. But of course, the Star Trek also had more, and the same thing I think with the Lone Ranger, like those two were saying there were values with the Lone Ranger. There were values with Star Trek in the future. And so Steve was always trying to speak to these values, but also in his teachings, he would be inventing things and he was trying to be very practical. So with Steve, I just learned so much. And whenever I would have a deep question, I would just ask him. And it's so nice to have those kind of people in your life where they have the experience, they have the knowledge. So I would ask him these very obscure questions about bounce. Like we have a chart and we have variability. Nobody pays attention to it. People will say that they do, but they don't pay attention to it. You just look at the people that have charts. And matter of fact, almost nobody pays attention to acceleration or these other things. But I don't want to get on a soapbox here. These are things that can be changed. But I would ask him these questions and he would have all of this information. It's like, yes, if you see this, it means this, this, and this. And if you see this, it would mean this. And when you know that and you start looking for it and you start putting it on, you're looking for the feedback of, all a chart is some human detects some behavior, they count some behavior. And again, if it's not a human, then it's a machine that's doing it. So you're going to have one of these two things, and there's some kind of count, and that count is then visually represented, and we make sense of it, and we put numbers on it if you're on the chart, and it tells you what is happening over here. And Steve gave me the ability to understand very clearly what all of these things meant. And so now when I look at a chart, I just see this rich tapestry of change and so much of it. There's so much going on. And it's like this beautiful little sparkly thing that has all kinds of incredible changes going on and tells you all this information about the learner. And that's been the greatest impact that I think Steve had. One of the, well, yeah, I'll just leave it there. That's probably the biggest thing that he's done for me.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. How long have you been a professor?
My first job was in 1999. I went to Penn State at 2000. So this is my 25th year
Wow.
at Penn State.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing. And where did you start? Like in which faculty?
I started off in special ed. So when I went to Ohio State, that was a PhD in special education. So I went from psychology, my master's degree was in special ed. Then I taught for several years, and then I went back into the special ed. So I've been in special ed for most of my life.
And what was your PhD in?
You mean my dissertation?
Yeah, dissertation.
Oh boy, I did this really obscure thing called contingency adduction, which maybe 20 people know about.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic, and I learned a lot through that PhD. To make a long story short, it looks at how can novel behavior occur, and there are many ways that novel behavior can occur, and this was one way of looking at how if a behavior has these conditions and there's another behavior over here, how do they come together and form a new behavior? You can think about that, these contingencies being induced. It's a very technical term and there's a lot behind it, but that's the easy way to think about it.
And what did you draw on in terms of looking at novel behavior?
I worked with children who were in kindergarten.
Yeah.
And I was teaching them to spell. And my thought was if I taught them some letter sounds and I taught them these things called phonemic awareness, do these things adduce and could these children learn to spell? Turns out, yes, they can.
Wow. Yep. Incredible. And did you apply that to other behavior, those strategies?
I left contingency adduction back with my dissertation, and then I had a fellow student of mine that did contingency adduction. He recently did his PhD, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And so there's my dissertation back in 99, and then there was a long time where I just didn't do it. It's not a very popular concept. I've done other things. It has nothing to do with, it was easier to do other things for me. Your career takes you into different places, and that's what happened to me. Love contingency adduction as a topic, but I didn't follow up with it and use it for a long period of time.
So then I don't really understand how you're working as a university professor. Can you do private work as well? Or did you supervise other people that were doing that type of work? How have you stayed? Obviously, you're published in precision teaching, extremely well published and spoken and well known, very much well known within precision teaching and beyond. Have you also continued to do applied work?
Yes. Number one, I've been a consultant for years. Even before I became a doctoral student, I've been consulting. That has been a way to keep me grounded and allow me to have access to learners. I would work with teachers. I would be on the floor when I'm working with young children. I'd be in the classroom. And back in probably 2010, I said, you know what? I want to have my own caseload. So for 4 years, I had my own caseload and I was working as a behavior analyst, working with children with autism, and being able to be back and have a full ability to make all the decisions, to create the whole treatment plan. That was remarkably rewarding. And it has also helped me keep the skills that I know need to be fresh for me to be able to teach about and use and speak from experience. It's given me that framework when I speak with students and when I come up with classes. I have examples that come from real life because to be able to read about it's one thing, to be able to do it is another thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, so tell me, what percentage of your work, I'm sorry, this is a naive question, your teaching and your work involves the chart?
Every semester that I've taught since 1999 has involved the chart.
Yeah.
I can tell you a lot of stories about that. If there are any of my former students listening to me, I feel like I owe them, I won't say an apology, but I could have done so much better. But you don't know what you don't know. And now where I am in life, I feel I could have done such a better job. I would spend like three-hour sessions teaching that chart, and I would make all of the students use it. And I've never wavered in my championing of precision teaching using it. Also, all of my students have done SAF meds in all the classes, my undergrad classes, they've all done SAF meds and they've all had personal charts. I have been true to keeping as much PT as I can in, but when you're in a college environment, there's only so much you can change without really pissing people off. And you still have to have your semester tests. I have 4 tests and they study for them. And I know it's not the most efficient way of doing it, but I do it because that's part of the system along with these other things that I do. So I try to keep as much PT in there as I can, but I still do traditional teaching, professoring.
So you are wearing a CentralReach top. That brings us to the next topic. Tell us the journey of Precision X.
At Penn State, they had this program called Techcelerator, and the idea was teach professors how to commercialize their research. If a professor can commercialize research, the university benefits from that because they own the IP from what the professor does. And I took that class and I learned all about business. This would have been 2013. And while I've been a consultant and I've had lifestyle businesses of my own, you generate cash from that. It's nice, but having a business is very different. If you're going to be serious about it and you want to have a good business, you want to scale that business, there's a lot you need to learn. And that course taught me about that. Back in, just to give the listeners an idea of where we were back in 2013, the iStore was huge, the iTunes. And my thought was, I'm going to create an app and people can download it from the iTunes store. And that way, this app would be very helpful. That was a naive way of thinking. Even if you have a hit, people were downloading these fart apps for like $1, and they were making $1 million because everyone was like, "Oh, I'm going to push this button."
Are you visualizing people downloading this app, collecting data, and taking data on the go? And
That's right. Anyway, my idea shifted, and at the end of this crash course, this Techcelerator crash course, you did this Shark Tank environment where everyone in that course, there were 6 of us, there were 5 other professors from Penn State and myself. We would pitch our idea for 15 minutes, and whoever had the best pitch by these judges would win a check for $35,000. And I didn't win the competition, but one of the judges was intrigued by what I was saying. We met afterwards. He became my business partner, and we just have been together for doing things for many years. So I was incredibly fortunate to have met him. His name's Dave Stevens, and he has a brilliant mind for business, and I learned so much about the business side from him. We created Chartlytics. Chartlytics was acquired in 2018 by CentralReach, and it was rebranded as Precision X, and it is still functioning to this day. And within CentralReach, it still has many customers, and it is a product that I'm very proud of, and I am very happy that it's still out there doing its thing. So that's the story of Precision X.
What was the journey across those 5 years or whatever? This is a pretty big thing to do, to disrupt paper charts and try and get out a tool on charting, technical for a start. How did you manage to do that when you had everything else that you were doing? I imagine it was labor of love.
Yes, it was a complete labor of love, big challenge. And you just have to do these things. You have to balance your time. And I had children who you never want to give up your children for your businesses. So you just figure out a way to make things work. I'm very fortunate in that I have a partner who's been very supportive of me my entire life. Well, back when I was a doc student, she would work as a waitress. I would go to school, so our time was offset. I would be in school. She would be with the kids. I would come home and be with the kids. She would go waitress. We're trying to just survive. Yeah. And having 3 young kids going through grad school I don't recommend that to anybody. but you do what you have to do. And I did these things. And throughout my entire career, she's been very supportive of me. And that's very helpful to have someone like that in your life. Without that support, I wouldn't be where I am today. So you just figure out, I don't know that that's a good way of saying how I did it. I just did it and it worked.
And so that's a big leap, that 5 years. I can only imagine how much work was involved. Tell me where the product is now and where you see it going. Because I think it's the reason I reached out to you, really, because I just wanted to thank you very much for your contribution, because
thank you.
That has impacted me personally and my business and the parents that I work with profoundly. And I have to say, I always have in the back of my head these little stories about, oh, you can teach 5-year-olds to chart. And I have advocated ever since I found my way to precision teaching, which changed the trajectory of my life and my daughter's life, and then all the students that I've worked with since. I've been advocating for parents to chart data, because when you have a kid with special needs and you learn to chart, it changes everything for you and then any other professional that you work with. Because, basically all my parents, whenever I tell them that their child is doing well, they go, show me the data. That's the first thing I teach them to say, sure, they're going well, but what does that mean on a chart? But the first time I've really been successful in having parents chart their children's data is with Precision X. And they absolutely love that. And of course, you want them to know the math and you want them to understand the chart, but really you just want them charting. And so, it's a little bit, I always sort of equate it to, you can know what's happening under the, what's happening inside a car, or you can just drive it and use it really effectively. And for parents that have a lot going on, if you can just teach them to collect data and put it on a chart, you can, encourage them to start looking at behavior in their children. So Precision X has made an enormous difference to me and to my clinic, because my staff love using it. The response effort of data is so much lower, and my training times have reduced by tens of hours, hundreds of hours. So it's an amazing tool that people love to use. And I really hope that I can have an influence on anyone that's listening to this to have a look at that tool or any other tool that really will help you attach yourself to the chart in a more profound way, and then encourage others to do the same. So to have parents coming in and charting their SAFMEDs with their kids, and then, being able to see their charts because they're collecting data at home from parents. I just can't tell you how much that impacts my team and us when the parents come and go, look, so I had to slice back. I won't just have me having a party. I'll just be like dancing, going, oh my goodness. If you're listening to this, Donna, she's my go-to parent that I've worked with for 12 years, and she will rant and rave about how amazing Precision X is. And I look at the chart and there's a faith change line there saying slice back. And I just, she's looked at the data and realized there's too many errors. And, you can teach parents some basic tools that allow them to make changes in their children's programming. And anyway, so I can't get more excited about this, about Precision X. So thank you for your contribution to that. It's really impacted people across the other side of the world, which is, I'm sure, why you did it. So tell me, what is the state of the product now? And I guess a bigger question is, I mentioned to you before that I'd really like to get your take on AI and how that's going to affect our field. Tell us, do you think AI is going to impact Precision X as a product, or could it?
Okay, 2 questions are in there. Number 1, state of Precision X. CentralReach, the company I work for, we were acquired back in 2018, and I've been with them ever since. And they're an amazing company. And looking at Precision X, it lives in an ecosystem of many other different software platforms. When we created Precision X, it never fit in with the other greater product, and it was just too much of an engineering hurdle. We'd have either had to completely restart from scratch Precision X, or just leave it as it is. And the decision was made, just leave it as it is. Right now, there hasn't been a lot of development that has been put into Precision X. It's being maintained. And it's an open question of if it will at one point start receiving more features. It hasn't received features in quite some time because our greater company, there's just so many different avenues that the company CentralReach is going down. And frankly, being honest, it's a very small number of precision teachers in the world.
Do they publish how many
We're talking about hundreds of thousands of other people that aren't using Precision X, and maybe 3 or 4 that just financially it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But again, the company, they said when we were acquired that they committed to keeping our product alive, and they have been true to their word. And that doesn't mean that something might happen in the future as precision teaching grows. So that's the current state of it right now. And the second question was about AI and will AI affect Precision X? I don't know that answer. Maybe. Precision X, as I mentioned, lives in this ecosystem. In our ecosystem, AI is having a big impact at CentralReach with many different products that we have, and it's doing remarkably well. People love what we're creating. We're creating real value, and I'm very proud of the efforts that we're putting forward because AI has been around for a very long time. It just seems like it's been around because in 2022, that's when ChatGPT came around and it was accessible and people were like, what? AI can do these things because of these language transformers that we have. And at any rate, without getting technical, people look at 2022 as the beginning of AI, but it wasn't the beginning of AI. That was the beginning of when people could use it in terms of commercial product really well. Although, again, depending on when you say AI is this big umbrella, and people have been using AI products for years. But when people talk about AI, that's what they mean. Like, oh, I can use AI to do these things. But even if you're using machine learning, some kind of algorithm that fits under AI, there's many things. You talk to Alexa, that's AI. It's natural language processing. We've been using AI for years, but now AI has become synonymous with these chat bots. And at any rate, we have been using these large language models to do incredible things at CentralReach, and I'm excited where it's going. And the thing that I love about CentralReach is we have this framework where it's all about responsible use of AI. I go to probably, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 AI conferences a year and actively doing research in the area. I'm starting to publish in the area. And it's a career pivot that I'm making because that's where we are in the world. And being able to blend this technology that we have, behavior analysis, precision teaching with AI, that's something that has to happen. And that's where I'm at right now.
So, in your wildest dreams, how do you see perhaps AI adding to the chart or to precision teaching as a field? Where do you see it could go in terms of analysis, data, prediction, those sorts of things? What could it bring to the chart?
It could do those things. It could help us. Many years ago, one of my former students, Amy Evans, we did this study where we went through all of the Journal of Precision Teaching, like every article, and we looked at all the different change measures we have: acceleration, bounce, frequency jumps, frequency turns, level, frequency jumps, all these different ways of understanding how you could characterize a change and describe it. And we looked at the journal and we said, how many people are actually reporting on these measures? And even within our own journals, it's a very stark message, which is we're just not using the tools to their advantage. The most that people used was acceleration. And even it wasn't even 50%. The numbers were, when we looked at all the journals in terms of having acceleration value, maybe like 23%, 25%. I'd have to go back and look. Don't quote me on that number, but it was low. It wasn't 50%. And then when you go to things like bounce, that number was pathetically low, like maybe 4%. And then some things were near 1% or 0%. And you have to ask yourself, and by the way, I've done research also with graphs in general, and I looked at behavior analysts, and I looked at how often do behavior analysts do these things, because even on the chart, we can quantify these things, but these change metrics are also available through visual analysis. You can look at a slope and then say, well, what direction is the slope in the next condition? And that information is very similar to our information in that very few people make use of those tactics to understand what's happening within a condition, what's happening between conditions. When you make a change, what are the differences? What we can do with AI is AI can do that for us.
Yeah.
And There's the question of like my research has only been descriptive. I don't know why it's happening. If you said, well, why aren't more people in precision teaching you reporting acceleration values and why aren't more people looking at bounce? I don't know, but I do know it's very few people because that's what the data say. And it's the same thing in behavior analysis. Why aren't more people doing it? I don't know. Is it because we don't teach it well enough? Is it because it's too hard and too much response effort? There's all kinds of reasons why it could be happening. But whatever those reasons are, if it's done for you, then people will be more likely to use it. And that's what's so exciting. And that's what we learned with Precision X. We would convert all of these ABA folks who in the past didn't want to use the chart. You give them a chart that they could learn in 5 minutes and be up and running. And now these whole organizations were doing it. Why? Because it was so easy to use. Literally, if you can put data in a spreadsheet, and you know this because you've used this for years, so think about AI being able to do that. If all of a sudden you had this table and it said, oh, your child is doing this and this, you are much more, there's a greater probability that you're going to pay attention to that because it's done for you. So that's where I'm excited about where AI will go because it's going to help us as humans. It's going to do these things that we're not doing. And again, whatever reason why we're doing it, I'm not going to look into that. But if people do start doing it and it's supplemented by AI, then I feel that that can have a profound impact on our field and help us help more people.
What about the fact, I mean, Ogden was ahead of his time in many, many ways. One of the things that he created was the behavior bank. Do you see that AI could look at bigger data sets and contribute to data beyond one learner and try and extract information about learning and about behavior from combining data sets?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I work at CentralReach, and again, I hear our CEO talk about this, and I don't know that this is the exact number, but we have something of the order of like 3 billion data points. It's probably more than that when it comes to behavior. We just have such a massive amount of data, and you can bet we're going to be using that, and we're working on that to figure out how can we use this massive data set to help people that are in behavior analysis. And it's not just behavior analysts that are using our platform. There's special ed teachers, there's speech and language pathologists, there's occupational therapists, there's school psychologists. There's all these people that are charting data. How can we use this massive amount of data to help people make better decisions, to help them be more informed? And that's what we're doing. That's what I'm the director of research for CentralReach, and these are projects that I'm working on in concert with other colleagues at CentralReach. So yes, that can be done. It will be done. And we're just at the beginning of this journey with where we're going with AI exploding on the scene. And many people are aware of it. Many people are using it. It's going to have a very outlying effect on our entire field.
Yeah, when I dream about the possibilities because of the amount of materials you have to prepare as a precision teacher and how many versions you have to try and different things with different learners, I just get excited when I think about what if AI can learn, how best to present stimuli in what order and how many exemplars to include. And it can analyze on the chart and make a phase change line for you and then draw upon those materials, like almost creating a curriculum as you go. Like, when you just dream from someone that doesn't know that much about AI, but spend a lot of time on charts and materials and changing things and watching response rates. I just think, wow, something like that's just looking at different methodologies for teaching and then looking at acceleration across those changes, et cetera. I get super excited about the ability to create materials and then provide those to other people and make this science easier to incorporate into teaching. So I'm sure you're about 4 billion steps ahead of me, but I imagine that this is possibly a big opportunity for our field to get further recognized. Am I dreaming too big?
No, not at all. There can be a sea change as precision teaching and Precision X shows what's possible. And if you had a tool that can keep continually growing, then what you might see is greater adoption. If you make things easier and it has a value for people, and that value is I can do these things that I couldn't do before, then they're likely to adopt it. And the greater impact that has on their ability to make changes, the greater impact that has on their ability to serve more clients. That's the way it works in business. That's the lesson that you learn. And I can see that happening in the future very quickly. It's here, and it's just a matter of developing these products and getting them out there for people to use.
Well, here's a question kindly provided to me by Ryan O'Donnell. Thank you, Ryan. For those that don't know, he has a newsletter on AI, he and David Cox, and I'm sure if you just search that, you'll be able to find it. I'm sure you'll print out your own resources as well, Rick, at some point. But are there any resources you're drawing upon right now to educate yourself that my listeners might be interested in, or any other products that you're looking at right now?
Good question. Shout out to Rhino, long-time colleague. That's a great question. Every day, this is no joke, I listen to podcasts, I watch YouTubes, I read articles, I do things, and I learn from what I'm doing. There's not one source that I would share with people. Depending on where you are in terms of AI, you should dive in. Like when you gave that advice about Og saying, when's the time to intervene? Now. When's the time to learn about AI? Now. Watch a YouTube. Just type in AI. You'll come up with the big YouTubers. There's some great guys that I listen to that are out there. Matt Wolf is one of the YouTubers that I listen to, and he has this really cool YouTube. They also, these guys have these podcasts. And there's just so many people that are out there that have resources, and they're breaking it down for you. And then you start using those, you integrate those, and you learn from them. This is no joke. I consider myself non-technical. I had never learned to code when I was growing up. I knew about these things, but I didn't know how to do them. I've coded several apps through using AI, and it's unbelievable that I, as a non-technical person, they have what's called low code and no code. You can create these apps that actually work. And I download them on my phone. I can do all sorts of different things that I could have never done. And again, there are limits to how much there's a term called vibe coding, which is where you're using your language to be able to code. More and more people that are non-technical, as the tools become better and better, we're going to be able to do more things. So there's a saying that as bad as AI is right now, that's the worst it's ever going to be, which means it's going to constantly keep getting better and better. So what you experience now is the worst it's ever going to be, because every day it gets better. It seems every day and every week there's more breakthroughs. I want to say to everyone interested in AI, if you're not doing it, figure out, learn about it, use it, and just continually expand upon it, because there's two things. I'll say this very quickly to wrap this thought up. Number one, if you want to use it, you should be using it in some capacity. And you don't have to do the coding and go really deep if you don't want to. But you also need to be aware. And this is what's true for society. We need to understand what these AIs can do, because frankly, there's no guardrails that are up there. If you look at governments and where people are in the regulations, there are sadly very few regulations. And as a result, bad things are happening in society with AI. And while it's very exciting, it can be very bad.
Yeah, in our field, what do you see some of the risks are in ABA with AI?
People can be reckless with it. They can share private data and put it into a chatbot. When you shouldn't be doing those things. People can be fraudulent with it. Where there's humans, there's behaviors that we classify as good, behaviors we classify as bad. And you're just going to get that with humans. And people, it's very easy. We get paid with notes. You deliver therapy, you create a note that documents the effects, you collect data, and then you share that in some point. That goes up to these funders that are paying for these services. And those funders could be a parent. Those funders could be a large insurance agent. Whoever that payer is, someone is paying you to perform these services, and you could easily be fraudulent and say, hey, make up my data, make up my thing, and AI will do that for you. It doesn't care. It is very subservient in that sense. It's very sycophantic in that sense. It'll tell you how amazing you are. It doesn't have those guardrails that are put in place. So it could do those things, If you ask it to create a program that's based on something in, like you don't have any assessment data, again, it's going to do those things. So there's many ways it could be used for ill, but yet it could also be used responsibly. It's hard to understand the future or to predict the future. Where we are now, I'm very optimistic on where we can go, but we have to do this. We should be having AI task force. Like ABAI should have a task force. We should have journals that are coming up that are talking about AI. We should have more professors that are learning about AI. That's what it's going to take for us to be able to profit from this technology.
So here, with all of your experience as both a behavioural analyst and a special education teacher, do you see a time where a screen is going to replace a person as a teacher? I know that's already happening in some regards. Do you see that?
It would depend on what that looks like. In general, this is a nuanced answer. We don't want to replace humans.
Yeah.
When you're in the human services field, education, psychology, parenting, we have evolved as a species to do certain things. We nurture our children. We have a connection with our children. We socialize with our children. And this is the same thing. Again, insert teacher. We socialize our students. We care for our students. Thinking that you can 100% replace that with technology is dystopia. That would be a horrible outcome. You know, those are those sci-fi films where, like The Matrix, where we're in these pods and we're just creating energy and there's this whole universe around us. No human wants that to be their destiny. And in our field, think about the medical field, the greater healthcare field. There are doctors that you wouldn't necessarily want 100% to get rid of humans. There are some things, however, though, that when we get to the point where AI can do things better than humans, then yes, you would want that. And there are things right now that AI can do that humans just can't do. There are things that are happening in radiology where AI is so good at detecting tumors, it's just beating humans all the time. What would you rather have? A human that is 50% accurate or an AI that's 99% accurate? I don't know about you, but I'm going to go with the AI there. That doesn't mean I want to get a chatbot message, a text message on my phone that says, you have cancer, blah, blah, blah. I want a human to be involved in there. I want a human looking at that data. I want a human talking to me and letting me know what are the likelihood. And it's the same thing in education. It's the same thing in behavior analysis. There are going to be things that AI can do as a human. If you think about one client that you worked with, think about all the data that you've generated. Think about all of the background of that human. Think about you've given an educational test back here. You've given another all of that information can be ingested. All that information, you cannot do that. You literally cannot do that as a human. So let's not be afraid of that. Let's embrace it, but let's look at the ethics. Let's do it in an ethical way and use that it can prepare information for us. So now you can make decisions that are so much better that you could have never made just with, you just literally can't do that. You can't look at 10,000 charts and make a decision. So I feel that when we think about AI, we need to balance this. We need to walk along a path where we're using it in a responsible, ethical way, but yet we're not displacing people, because it's simple to say that, okay, well, let's just put a chat bot there. No, we need humans in the loop, so to speak, and we need to understand how will AI supercharge us so that we can help more people. I feel if we can do that, if we can strike that balance, then we're using technology to accelerate our species versus going down this path that is dark.
Yeah. So tell me, have you dropped a chart into ChatGPT or similar and asked it questions about the data?
Yeah, I've used all the language models, popular ones, Gemini, Claude, OpenAI, and I have ChatGPT is what people will refer to. And I put in charts and I've said, analyze this chart. The other thing that I've done is I've written a lot. So I will upload my chapters
Yeah.
on this is what bounces, because you need to teach AI what it's looking
I
for.
was going to say, how
And it
much do you
comes
know?
back with incredible answers. And I haven't created an app that does that, but AI is really good if you teach it and tell it what to look for in giving you those answers.
Okay, amazing. Is that something that you would be looking at in the future, to do a specific app to do that?
I have some things that I'm cooking,
Okay,
and I'm not willing to share those
cool.
publicly,
That's good. Excellent.
but
As long as we know somebody's on
when
it.
you when you've been an entrepreneur, you're always thinking about what are some other things that you might be engaged in. And I'm still a professor. I'm still working at CentralReach. I love both of those institutions. And will I be at both of those places forever? Who knows? But if I am there, that doesn't mean I can't be doing these other things as well. So we'll see. We live in a time now where I want to learn as much as I can, but yet when you have this great knowledge, if no one else is applying it, then like, oh yeah, I know about these things, but I'm not doing anything. So in some capacity, even if it's on a small scale, I want to keep tinkering. I want to keep inventing. And if something were to happen that turned out to be very useful, then maybe I can grow that thing. We'll see.
Now, you did mention to me, I don't know if you want to talk about this or not, but you mentioned that you might be going into some sort of Arab parent training, which obviously is
I am.
to me. Is that something
Yes.
you can talk about yet?
I can talk about that. One of the things that I do is I write. I write books. I have a book for parenting that's coming out. I will be creating other products for parents, and this will be a small company that I'll be launching and looking at. This isn't autism specific. This is just any parent that is interested in learning about behavior analysis, the concept. This book that I wrote, I want to say it's probably one of the best books I've ever written. It is the best book I've ever written because I've written these other precision teaching books, but they're very technical. I have been a science writer for the greater time in my career. This book that I've written, and I'm breaking the rules, this book is written with what I think that when I hope is humor. This book, there's going to be some swear words in there. There's going to be a lot of my personality that's going to be in this book. It's taking things from precision teaching, taking things from behavior analysis, and putting it in a way that people can understand it. That's how precision teaching started. Ogden Lindsley started precision teaching for parents and teachers because he saw this incredibly powerful science and he used these different terms. He believed in plain English and tried to get parents and and he did more than try. He did it. He got many parents, many teachers translating the science into an applied way. And now I want to take my shot at that. And this book is, at the time of you and I talking, by the time your podcast come out, the book will be done. It will be available. Hopefully.
Where can our listeners find it?
That's a good question. Maybe what we could do is in your show notes in the future, put that up there. I don't have the website built yet, so it's hard to answer that question. But the website literally this month is going to be launching. So you caught me in a time where that information will be out there, but it will be at a website. And again, if you type my name up there, Rick Kubina, you'll be able to get all of my works.
Amazing. Well, look, this is now well over an hour. Then I promised only to speak to an hour, but I have to ask you one more question.
Yes.
That's all right. Do you have 5 more minutes?
Absolutely.
Amazing. Some of the people that will be listening to this podcast are precision teachers in the field. Others are hearing about precision teaching for the first time and then maybe even the chart for the first time. Can you just talk a little bit to the argument that is out there in the world about destandardization of the chart versus using a standard chart? You have a paper published on acceleration.org, the Standard Acceleration Society, about destandardization of the chart. You're an expert in this area. Can you talk a little bit for people that are not as familiar with charting as some of our listeners about what this means, what this concept of destandardization of the standard acceleration chart means?
Yeah. Throughout the entire existence of precision teaching, there have been people that have created non-standard charts that are close to the standard chart. And there can be problems with that. However, this is the issue with science. And this is true in every field, and we're no different. When you have a field, you have people that learn methods along this time frame. And then the field inevitably is going to move forward. And the longer you're in this field, if you become very rigid, then this is your frame of reference, and anything outside of that frame of reference is going to be a problem. And with the standard acceleration chart, when you talk about destandardizing it, what that means for some people, if anything is not the paper chart, it's destandardized, which I created a digital chart, and that digital chart can do things where the paper chart looks like this. It was created back in the day because that was the technology. You had to use paper, and it was in 8.5 by 11. That's the medium for the paper, and it had these specific dimensions. Well, if it's digital, like there are 6 cycles on that chart. A cycle goes from 0.001 to 0.01, 0.01 to 0.1. 0.1 to 1, 1 to 10, 10 to 100, 100 to 1,000. Each one of those cycles, there's 6 of those times 10 cycles. That's the chart. Well, guess what? When you digitize it, you can go up to infinite cycles. You can go down to infinite cycles. There are also these things called acceleration periods. So on the daily chart, if you go from a Sunday to Sunday, 7 days, that's called a period. There happen to be 20 acceleration periods because that's what the paper chart held. So people that say destandardizing the chart say, nope, if it is not 6 cycles and not 20, it's destandardized. But again, when it's digital, it can go on forever. And I've had these arguments with people which are absolutely absurd, but from my vantage point, they wouldn't say their arguments are absurd because they passionately believe this. And one of the things that I've done, someone was arguing with me, and he's like, no, because with our Precision X, if you stretch your screen, you can now have more than 20 acceleration periods. You could have 30 acceleration periods or 40 or whatever. And they're like, well, that's destandardized. And so you know what I did is I took a paper chart, and then I took another paper chart and I folded it and I put the 2 charts together. So you had one frame and another frame. I said, okay, if I literally hold these 2 charts together, is it now all of a sudden not standard? So if you tape one paper, and think about that, now you have 40 acceleration periods because you tape them together. And you have to fold the one side so it looks like it's just one framework. I mean, what do you think about that argument? Is now all of a sudden because you taped it together, it's still the same chart, but yet you run into these kinds of issues where people are very hesitant to break through to this new technology, which is digitalization. And frankly, I'm sorry to say this to anybody, but paper is a dead medium, and your paychecks are no longer. Like, how many people actually get a physical check? Maybe occasionally you get a refund or something, but very few people are using paper checks. And money, like how many people use, like we have products like Zelle, Venmo, these ways of sending cash, and more money is going digital. And you just look across our society and more things are going digital. Records are becoming digitized and fewer paper. So when people talk about that destandardization, you have to understand what they're saying. Now, there are some very true arguments from their point of view where if you don't have that, it's actually, I think it's 33.5 degrees. People round it up to 34 degrees, but that's not the technical, whatever that technical number is, I forget. I think it's like 33.5 something degrees, where you go from one side to the other. It has to maintain that. We in Precision X maintain that. So if you blow it up or you squeeze it down, it's still maintaining that ×2, and it's maintaining the focus. When I publish articles, I take a little slice of the chart and I take the grid lines out. I do this digitally, and I share my data with people. And I've been very successful sharing charted data in the space because I'm meeting people where they are. That's not a standard chart to what people are saying, which is 6 cycles in 20 acceleration periods, but yet it is this little sliver, and it's all standard, and I can still report on acceleration measures, bounce measures, and so on. So anyway, that question that you ask is a good one, and it's something we need to continue arguing about. The people that have their perspective, God bless them. They're wonderful. They're part of our history. And it can be challenging for some people to move beyond thinking about where we're going in the future. And frankly, we need their voices, and we need them to be pushing back and understanding. So what's the medium? How does the science move forward? And I'm not saying I have the answer, but at least my opinion on this is we need to be embracing the future and understanding how can we profit from technology and where it is and use that so that our field, while maintaining our standards, can move forward. If we don't do that, we're frankly going to die on the vine. Can you imagine going to undergrads and telling them they have to use this paper chart? Who's going to do that? Like, nobody's using it. There are still some people out there that are listening, and I get it. You learned about the paper chart, you use that paper chart, and again, God bless you. You keep doing what you're doing, you're being successful, but there's going to be limits to how impactful you are. There was this time where we had people that were complaining when we had Precision X, and they're like, oh, well, I can drop dots so much faster than I can do it in Precision X. Number one, we tested that and we found out that that wasn't true. But number two, you know what? If you can drop dots, let's just pretend that that's true, that you can drop dots faster than you can put it in Precision X. You know what you can't do faster with your paper chart is figure out a frequency multiplier, or figure out acceleration multiplier, or figure out an improvement index. That, by you doing math and you doing all those things, is going to take you 10 minutes, 5 minutes maybe, whatever, versus having it done instantly. And people don't think that way. They're just thinking at the most basic level of, well, I'm going to drop a dot. Fine, dropping a dot is the entry level. The real glory is understanding the acceleration line, understanding the bounce, understanding all of these things, which is done instantly for you. Whereas you have to pull out these tools with the paper chart, which takes more time. And people never think about that because all they're thinking about is dropping dots and just looking at the very just general, are my dots going up or whatever? And that's a very elementary chart. Okay, I'm starting to rant here. I realize that.
I could add to that because I'm using that chart also. I can understand the real concerns of destandardization of a chart outside of somebody like you who knows the chart very, very well, because people have dedicated their careers to ensuring that we're looking at behavior on a standard chart, and that's very understandable. But in terms of Precision X, where you can change a daily chart to a weekly chart to a monthly chart with one click, you can change aim dates, the number of things that you can do in that chart very, very quickly, and literally someone can learn to use that. I've taught parents in my reception as they're picking up their children to use Precision X, and they've gone home and used it that day, so that I care, just like you, about more people engaging with our science. So whatever it is that has resulted in people not picking up this extraordinary tool, reducing response effort and getting people more in line with what precision teaching brings is such an amazing thing. So yeah, I think you're right. But yeah, on the other side of things, I can also understand, because of all of the lectures that I've attended of yours for stretch to field graphs and all the problems with those, why people are attached to standards and 6 cycles on the chart and not wanting to lose perspective of and looking at the whole realm of data across all the 6 cycles. So I can understand that. But we will refer people to both of the papers. And I put both of your papers into ChatGPT today and ask them to extract information and compare and contrast that. So I'm going to put that in the show notes as well. There you go. I'm sure you'll be
lovely.
And I just cannot thank you enough for everything you've shared on. You probably didn't think I was going to question you on such a broad range of topics, but it's amazing the number of topics you can talk to. And it's just, been amazing to have you on. Thank you so much for helping me relaunch my podcast. And thank you for your contribution. I know that's a massive understatement in everything that you've done for this field and continue to do. And I'm super excited to see where you go next. And I'll be closely watching. We'll publish in the show notes your contribution to parent training, which is very close to my heart. And thank you so much for being here. It's just such an honor to have you.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for your podcast. You have made wonderful contributions, and it has been my pleasure to be your guest today.
Thank you for listening to episode 17 of the ABA and PT podcast with Dr. Rick Kubina. You'll find references in the show notes to this episode. In episode 18, I'm delighted to welcome 2 extraordinary precision teachers, both previous guests on the podcast, where we talk about the Precision Positive Interactions Project. That's a lot of P's, but I'll refer to it as the PPIP. Jack Allman joins us to talk about how he commenced this project in the midst of a world that is desperate for more positives. He tells how he was touched by an encounter with one person where a smile had an enormous impact on her, and so was the start of the PPIP. As I thought about this project, I started tracking PIs and immediately thought of Dr. Abigail Culkin, who joins us on this podcast to share her wisdom and her views on how to bring more positives to the world that really needs it.